Χριστός Ανέστη και χρόνια πολλά. Αν και ο απόψινός μας ομιλητής μιλά εντυπωσιακά καλά τα ελληνικά, θα μου επιτρέψετε να συνεχίσω στα αγγλικά για τους υπόλοιπους που είναι εδώ και δεν το έχουν καταφέρει ακόμα. Dear colleagues, welcome to this evening's lecture, the first after our Easter break, which I hope you all enjoyed. Our speaker tonight is Professor Stephan Schmid from the Humboldt University in Berlin, who was with us also last year in the framework of the Erasmus Exchange Program, which our two universities have signed. We are very happy that he has accepted to give another lecture this year while he is visiting Cyprus for his research, but also to take his students around the island on an educational trip. We sincerely hope that some of the students who are here this evening will come back to our university as Erasmus Exchange for a semester or two. They are most welcome. Professor Schmid studied archaeology at the University of Basel in Switzerland, where he completed his PhD with a thesis in Nabatean pottery. From 1996 to 2002, he acted as a deputy director of the Swiss School of Archaeology in Greece. During that period, he also directed the school's excavations at the very important site of Eretria on Euboea. After completing his habilitation at the University of Paris I in Sorbonne on the subject of Hellenistic pottery from the sanctuary of Apollo Daphniforos in Eretria, he moved in 2002 from the Swiss School of Athens to a teaching position at the University of Paul Valéry in Montpellier in France, where he taught initially as an associate professor and then as a full professor until 2008. That year, he was elected professor of classical archaeology at the Humboldt University in Berlin. From 2012 to 2017, he served as the acting director of the Institute of Archaeology of the Humboldt University. His interests include various aspects of the ancient Greek and Roman world. Professor Schmid directs a project on a Roman settlement in France, as well as several projects focusing on the culture of Nabateans and in the archaeology of Jordan. In fact, he has spent much of his academic career excavating and surveying various sites in Jordan, including Petra. At the same time, he has undertaken the publication of the finds of the Swiss excavations at Eretria relating to the Hellenistic and Roman periods. He is also the principal investigator of the Cluster of Excellence 264, entitled Topi, the Formation and Transformation of Space and Knowledge in Ancient Civilizations. Professor Schmid has published 3 monographs, 2 on the culture of the Nabateans and 1 on Eretria, as well as numerous articles on journals and various volumes on a large variety of subjects, from pottery to Augustan propaganda, aqueducts, and others. In 2017, he founded and presided over the Studia Cyprologica Berolensiensia Society. The society pursues on its own and in collaboration with other German and foreign organizations and institutions the promotion of scientific research on Cypriot antiquity, especially in the archaeological remains of the island of Cyprus. This is, of course, of great interest to all of us here, and we would like to take this opportunity to thank him for this initiative. It's very important to have a focus of Cypriot archaeology in the Humboldt University in Berlin, and hopefully some of his students will follow on this path. One of the projects which he directs and has now put under the auspices of this society is the research on the archaeological activities of Max Ohnefalsch-Richter from 1850 to 1917 in Cyprus. In this evening's lecture, he will present to us some of the results of this research. The title of his lecture is Max Ohnefalsch-Richter's Research on the Built Tombs of Idalion. Stephan.
Καλησπέρα σας και χρόνια πολλά και από μένα και ευχαριστώ πολύ και για την πρόσκληση και για την ευγενική εισαγωγή και όπως και η καθηγήτρια Κασιανίτου θα αλλάξω και εγώ στα αγγλικά. Stressing on my turn that we are waiting for you, the students of the Cyprus University, the Department of Archaeology, to come to Berlin in the framework of our Erasmus Exchange Program. We, the professors, we kind of understood it and we are exchanging, so now we are waiting for you to exchange in one way or another. Thank you very much, all of you, for coming, which to me is quite a surprise because, as you may have understood from the title of my lecture, it is mainly a project focusing on the history of research. I still remember when I was a student at Basel University, our professors from time to time, they had lectures and presentations on the history of research, and I have to confess, I always thought it was very boring. I was much more interested in the real archaeology, dealing with fieldwork or with objects and not with the history of research. Well, a few years later, I am here and I'm talking about the history of research. I hope it might not be too boring after all. Last year, about the same time of the year, I was already here and I was speaking about the life and works related to Cypriot archaeology of Maks Ohnefalsch-Richter in general terms, so I can skip this kind of introductional part and going right into medias in res as soon as I understood how it works. I would like to start with a quote from one of the travelers of the later 19th century, a German, by the way, Karl Robert, I think, Friedrichs, who was here in the 1860s and published a book shortly before he died in 1872. You have the German original on top and English translation on the bottom, saying that the tombs of Dali are extraordinarily poor in architectural form, despite the fact which he knew, as everybody knows, that they were very rich in finds. But apparently at that time they were considered to be quite poor of architectural form, and this is what we are going to have a look at it this evening. Quite a lot, by the way, on Maks Ohnefalsch-Richter and his work on Cyprus. You will be able to read, I hope shortly, by end of May or early June, in a volume we are publishing, which was initially supposed to be published to commemorate the 100 years of the passing away of Maks Ohnefalsch-Richter in 1917, and I'm actually quite happy to see a few contributors to that volume in the audience tonight. So what I am going to present you is contained in the famous and often quoted manuscript of Maks Ohnefalsch-Richter called, and this was also the name that supposedly should have bared his major publication Tamasos and Idalion, which, as some of you may know, never saw the light of the day, never was published actually. However, in 1893, Maks Ohnefalsch-Richter received a substantial grant by the Prussian king and emperor of Germany, Wilhelm II, and from that time onwards he owed something to the German emperor and the Prussian king, which was supposed to be the volume. Since he wasn't able to publish the volume in 1908, he was kind of forced to hand over the manuscript and whatever was related to that manuscript to the Berlin Museum, to the Antiquarium, the forerunner of nowadays Antikensammlung in Berlin. Just to show you, this is a couple of random pages of the manuscript, which fortunately also exists as a typoscript, and for the rest of my lecture I'm dealing with and showing you excerpts of the typoscript. Something that Maks Ohnefalsch-Richter was dealing with very intensively was the topography of ancient Idalion and its immediate surroundings. A little bit of his work was published with another in his book Cyprus, the Bible and Homer, but also in an earlier article in a journal he co-founded and which existed for about 18 months, called The Owl. And from this Owl article by him in 1888 is the map you see here, which is very difficult to read and to understand because it bears a lot of small signs in here, crosses, hatches, numbers, which are partially explained in the also difficult to read handwriting on the left and on the right. He had planned to redo this map in a much better style and also in better quality and bigger for his book, but unfortunately the prototype for that said map for the book was lost in one of the many turbulences of the life of Maks Ohnefalsch-Richter. So what he did when he handed over, or before handing over his paperwork to the museum in Berlin in 1908, he hand-colored a copy of that map that was published in 1888. You see the coloring here. The coloring is explained partially in the legend to the map and more extensively in detail in the manuscript and in the typoscript. And it's in combination of these different elements that quite some interesting features as for the ancient topography of Idalion can be obtained. Within others, it can, of course, be integrated to a modern three-dimensional model of the area around Idalion. It can be integrated in a GIS and furthermore. So what you see on the right is the three-dimensional version of the said map, and here you have the same thing put over a simple Google Earth map. What we have been doing in previous years was verifying as far as possible whether his indications indeed do reflect to a certain degree the archaeological reality of the area. And I have to say that everywhere where it was still possible to verify, because the area has not been constructed over or had not been taken away by the river or whatever, everywhere where it was possible to verify his indications, they turned out to be not only correct but also very precise. I'm not talking about his interpretations of what he may have found or observed. I'm simply talking about the topography and the description of what he might have seen or what other people might have told him what existed there. I'm using one example I've already presented last year and then a new one just to give you a glimpse into what is possible to verify from his sayings and writings. We start here in the north of Dali in the area of Agios Sosomenos Nikolides, where this is the map, and here you have the points put on the modern satellite picture. He correctly identified a settlement, a Bronze Age settlement here with number 30, I think it is, and a necropolis of the same period at point 29. He also was one, maybe not the first one, but one of the early archaeological photographers. He actually did take quite a lot of pictures, unfortunately I have to say not so much about structures and excavations, but much more about objects he found in his excavations. Nevertheless, some pictures also do illustrate structures and landscape, one could say. This is one of the typical plates he had planned to integrate in his publications. Part of them had been published previously. So here you see a part of the photograph and a part of the legend with the numbering 29 for the necropolis of Agios Sosomenos Nikolides and the point number 30, the corresponding settlement. This is the full picture with the landscape that didn't change so much, but the emptiness of the landscape is quite impressive compared to nowadays pictures. The letter P is for Potamia, the village of Potamia. The letter D is for the village of Dali, and this here is one of the contributory rivers that joins the Yalias River a little bit further away. And this is supposed to be the same picture today, and as you can see, I hope, these rock-cut tombs, Ohnefalsch-Richter, he was not the first one, but Ohnefalsch-Richter observed and mapped and partially excavated, they are partially still visible today. Another map that he published is also quite well known. This is the detailed plan of Idalion with what he thought is the city walls as far as he could see them. Here too, the map was published with very few random indications, again in the OL of 1888, in an article that says as lettering the topography of ancient Idalion, and if one goes into it, it deals with everything besides the topography of ancient Idalion. So here too, what he wanted apparently to say, he wrote down in the manuscript, which was never published. Here too, this map is very reliable. It has been done by Carletti, the surveyor of the British, actually of Horatio Kitchener, who was working at that period at Dali, in the area of Dali, and I use it within others to introduce to you. Well, I'll come back to this later on. Another point to show the reliability of Max Ohnefalsch-Richter's work is focusing on the East Necropolis of ancient Idalion. Here you have the Western Necropolis, the East Necropolis, and if one of the discoveries actually we were very happy and very lucky to make in the archives of Ohnefalsch-Richter in Berlin is this map here, this plan here, which depicts, of course, the Eastern Necropolis of ancient Idalion. You can see again here on the top, and which indicates his soundings. These are his soundings he was able to carry out in 1894. in the later part of summer and fall 1894. The only thing that is missing is a very small sounding he did in early 1895. So all his soundings on the East Necropolis of Idalion are visible here, including a rather detailed drawing of the walls he discovered. The walls are all numbered, either numbered and lettered, and he refers constantly to these numbers and letters in his manuscript. This is important within others because it allows to precisely relocalize quite a lot of the finds he made there in a very short period, quite impressive. Within other, this rather impressive piece of work, it's a little bit on the life size, never has been published so far as I can see, and fortunately on the back side, this is the photograph on the left, and on the back side of the photograph you have a numbering, New Series 37A and North in different letters. They do refer to the different parts of the manuscript, and hence it is possible to identify not only the piece but to clearly state that it was found within this wall here, which is a very important part of for the topography of ancient Idalion. Already in previous years, Ohnefalsch-Richter had realized that apparently all this part here was surrounded by a more or less massive wall. He understood that this wall has to be later than the rest of the walling of ancient Idalion, and the walls he was able to look at in detail, they were all built with a quite impressive amount of spolia. All the works, including the piece I'm showing you here. Why is this important? It is important because we will be able to date the various findings he made in that wall, and of course the newest piece of evidence that we will be able to identify will give at least a terminus antequem known for the construction of that wall, which will become quite important leading up to some historical reflections as to the history of Idalion. This is definitely not the latest piece of evidence. It's from the late archaic period, and I'm not going to deal with it in more detail. This is how the typoscript looks at more specifically when dealing with findings from tombs that we was able to excavate over the years. The best archive evidence is again for the period 1894 and 1895, where he was able to excavate around 100 tombs in the immediate neighborhood of Idalion. This is how the manuscript and the typoscript is presented. You have first the numbering of the tomb, so tomb number 50-something, and then you have in continuous numbering the different objects he was finding in the tombs. And that listing, that catalog, and also the description refer to the situation before the splitting of the finds, because as you may be aware, at that period the finds were split between the owner of the territory of the area, the excavator, or better the people who gave the finances for the excavation, and the local government, meaning these were the finds, the third, that was supposed to end up in the Cyprus Museum. And luckily enough, as I just said, Ohnefalsch-Richter was quite an active photographer, he and his wife, by the way. So especially for this period, 1894-95, we cannot say whether Max Ohnefalsch-Richter or his wife Magda Ohnefalsch-Richter did take the respective pictures. In any case, as you can see, the pictures, they bear small numbers, and these small numbers do correspond to the catalog entry, as one could say, of his various tomb descriptions. This means that with some work, some investigation, we will be able to put together and to relocalize maybe not all, but quite a substantial amount of tomb context from these excavations here, which were focusing in this area. I can not really see it, I hope you can. Here supposedly are the two acropolis of Idalion, so this necropolis here is situated a little bit extramuros. And funny enough, one example from tomb 33 contains that well-known, at least published, stelae representing a male and a female person, but it also contains quite some pottery evidence, especially the pieces seen over here. This is an overall picture, and details show the different findings. Now, two things have to be added here. The contents of Tomb 33 came to Berlin. This is why the stele to the left is on display in the Neues Museum, in the Cyprus collection of the Berlin Museum. The other finds too came to Berlin. However, a part of them was taken away at the end of World War II. And for instance, the small skyphos here now is on the Pushkin Museum in Moscow. Don't know whether you have seen this 2-volume, huge, massive catalogue of the Cypriot antiquities of the Pushkin Museum in Moscow, 2014. I didn't count them, but I think about 75% of the objects presented in the catalogue used to be in Berlin up to 1945, and are now in the Pushkin Museum in Moscow, and quite most of them come from Max Ohnefalsch-Richter's excavation on the island of Cyprus. The other thing that one has to add is that you probably have seen that, and much quicker than I did, since I'm still a kind of a neophyte in Cypriot archaeology. It's quite difficult to understand how pottery from the geometric period could belong to the same tomb than late archaic stelae. So something is fishy here, but typoscript and manuscript of Ohnefalsch-Richter are very firm. He says that all of this belongs to tomb number 33. We have spent a couple of weeks here with a small team of collaborators looking at the storage rooms of the Cyprus Museum, and also looking at the exhibition of the Cyprus Museum and the Dali Museum. And indeed, in 10 working days, as many objects belonging to this tomb excavation of Ohnefalsch-Richter, 10 objects, we were able to identify. Now, dealing with monumental built tombs, which is the issue of tonight's lecture, it is well known that Ohnefalsch-Richter had a keen interest in monumental built tombs, and already in quite earlier stages of his career he started dealing with them. This is one of the plates in Cyprus, the Bible, Kypros, the Bible and Homer, that deals with built chamber tombs. Now, Kypros, the Bible and Homer was published in 1893, but already one of his earliest official publications in the Journal of Hellenic Studies of 1883 was dealing with built chamber tombs. And again, I'm not going to talk about the details of the interpretation of these tombs he proposes. I just wanted to stress that his plans and his drawing are of a high degree of accuracy, and he apparently was a quite exact observer as to the different roofing types of the tombs he was dealing with. For instance, eagerly distinguishing between gabled slab roofing and cobbled cobbled roofing of the tombs he was looking at. This will gain some importance in a moment. One may ask why he is not officially dealing with built tombs from Idalion in his publications. A part of the reason may be found in this newspaper article of later 1894, when he was still in Cyprus. He used to be here from May 1894 until early summer 1895. Then he left back to Germany, and still while being in Cyprus he started publishing newspaper articles in Germany but also elsewhere. As you can see, this is in German from, well, it doesn't say from when it is from later 1894, dealing with his excavations here in Tamassos and Idalion. And he says, for instance, here that here he's dealing with the so-called royal tombs he was able to excavate in Tamassos, and he says that more detailed plans, maps, drawings and photographs will be presented in my next book, which is the famous Tamassos and Idalion that never was published. And he also says so in another article of the belletristisch-literarische Beilage to the Hamburger Nachrichten, again later in 1894. As you can see here, 14th something of October. Here, twice in the same article, he says that more detailed plans and maps and information about these tombs of Tamassos will be published in my opus magnum, as he considered it, Tamassos and Idalion. But at least he mentions the built tombs of Tamassos. He doesn't say a word about built tombs of Idalion. So in the official record of the works of Max Ohnefalsch-Richter, there simply are no built tombs in Idalion. This may be related partially to the fact that he himself actually did not excavate any built tombs, but he documented, as far as was possible, built tombs that were discovered mostly by the local inhabitants of modern Dali when they were looking within others for building material for their houses. So the state-of-the-art of built tombs of the Cybergeometric, Cyberarchaic and Cyberclassical period is the one that is presented within others in the beautiful work of Dimos Christou. And you probably know there is one built tomb here, the Taphos number 1, which has to be located somewhere here. I cannot really see it. And which some of you may have already visited, beautifully built, probably archaic chamber tomb. And that's it. Now, going in the manuscript of Max Ohnefalsch-Richter, I have to add, I already indicated it, one point with supposedly built chamber tomb is missing here, but he clearly had pointed it out, pointed it out here, point number 1 in the more detailed map of the city. Point number 1 is the Chapel of Ioc Ergos, which he was very much interested in, within others, because he had discovered that Phoenician inscription that was built into the wall, and after lengthy quarrel with the British administration obtained the right to tear it down actually from the chapel, and it is now exposed in the Museum of Ancient Idalion on the spot. So all the arrows you can see here and the different points supposedly are built chamber tombs he is dealing with in the manuscript, and here you see the satellite picture with the same indications. So it's point number 14, point 22, point 21, point 9 and point 19. The sequence of the points seems to be a little bit arbitrary. I'm going to follow them as he presented it in the manuscript. What he did in the manuscript, he takes the supposed reader starting from the East Necropolis, then jumping to the West Necropolis, and then going around more or less the ancient city, describing in detail all the city walls, all the excavations he carried out and other people before him carried out, where he still was able to obtain information. Just for the details, when Max Ohnefalsch-Richter arrived in Cyprus and started developing a kind of archaeological interest in late 1879, early 1880, when he started working in Dali, he went to the mayor of Dali and told him, he's describing the story in his manuscript, please, I want to meet all the men that are still alive and that used to work with Hamilton Long, with Palma di Cesnola, with Colonna Cecaldi, and I want them to show me all the spots where anything they can remember was found. This is how he started dealing with the topography of Idalion. And of course, it's quite interesting to see that. It also teaches us a little bit about the reliability of the information, meaning that in some points we probably have to be careful, because what he is using is not first-hand information, but second or third-hand information. And that is especially true for the various tombs. So we start with point number 14 at that spot here, just outside the necropolis, the main necropolises he was mapping. This is about how it looks nowadays. Of course, it's not possible to pinpoint it on 5 square meters, but at least on 50 square meters, we are pretty sure that this is the area of chamber tomb at point number 14, or maybe something like this, which is the same neighborhood. Now, in the manuscript, and now starts the difficult part because I cannot really good see it, he says that point 14 is marked by a triangle on the map. This is the triangle here, meaning that it is one of the spots where, and he says compare with chapter so-and-so, where a huge tomb built from stones with a pointed roof, so far whatever that means, has been found. And he says, as figure series 2, paper number something something, sorry. It is destroyed by now since a long time, but the spot of where it was found is absolutely surely approved, says Ohnefalsch-Richter. The funny thing is that the spot 14 on Ohnefalsch-Richter's map, more or less here, is immediately beside that narrow entrance here, and that narrow entrance leads to a well-known second-built chamber tomb of Idalion that has been published in 1972 by Vassos Karageorgis in the Bulletin de Correspondance Hellénique. So at the first moment, one could think that actually this is the same tomb. Nevertheless, there are two reasons why it is not. Ohnefalsch-Richter clearly says that by his time it had already been destroyed, while this still exists perfectly preserved by today. And he also clearly says that it had a pointed roof, while this tomb here, as you can say, has a vaulted roof. So it's no surprise that we have apparently more than one built tomb in the area of that extended necropolis, of one of the many extended necropolis of ancient Idalion. We continue with point 21 over here, and here, now this is the triangle 14, here you can see 4 triangles at point number 21. And indeed, it is a small hill. On the small hill nowadays is a public school. You can see here, and on the other part of the hill is the Muslim cemetery of Idalion, of modern Idalion. While in the later 19th centuries there was to be found a small rocky outcrop, and it is indicated as point number 21 on the map, and here have been found before my times, says Ohnefalsch-Richter, 4 huge stone-built chamber tombs with pointed roofs, and they have been dismantled by the local inhabitants in order to build their houses. They are identical in construction technique and building technique with the built stone tomb that I was able to see in October 1887 at point 19. So he is referring to another point, which we will see later on, and he gives for that point 19, so the comparandum, the same reference, figure 2, series, paper, number, so-and-so. Then he continues, while at point 19 the tomb has a specific form, we will see, the tombs at point 21 apparently had 1 and 2 chambers. So we are dealing with 4 tombs. They had either 1 or 2 chambers at that specific spot, and they had pointed roofs. Then he doesn't say anything in the manuscript about the other than that for point 21. However, the legend of the map says that, in a smaller mound, there were 4 other tombs with not pointed roof, whatever that means. In the manuscript, he says that immediately to the north of the mound with the 4 chamber tombs, which is, so this is the map with the 4 chamber tombs. He says that immediately on its northern flank there was a sanctuary of one of the many sanctuaries. Then he continues in the legend and says there is another small mound a little bit farther north, and there 4 more chamber tombs with not pointed roofs had been located. Now, as you can see, the round circle are the sanctuaries, quite a lot of sanctuaries here in Idalion. So I think he simply misplaced the red circle that should be here according to the manuscript. So we have the bigger mound with the 4 chamber tombs with pointed roof, and we have the smaller mound with the chamber tombs with not pointed roofs, and at least the small mound can still be seen today. This is how it looks like. And of course, no traces of built chamber tombs. Then again, we come to point number 22 on the map and on the manuscript. He doesn't say a great deal. It's a tomb built of stone, roof pointed. That's it, no further mention. But at least we have another one at point 22. Point 22 is here compared to point 21, and it could be here or here so precise. The map does not allow more precision than that, but anyways, the tomb wasn't visible even in the period of Max Ohnefalsch-Richter. Now finally we come to point 19. Point 19 is to the east of the city walls of ancient Idalion, at this area here. And the description here is quite interesting. First, the pictures. This is how the area looks like, and the actual inhabitants of Idalion, Dali, they still confirm that the Eliesh Dugir, I've forgotten his name, Dugir Sava, seem to still show traces of a more extended necropolis, and indeed this is the point of the built chamber tomb, and the green dots here are a more extended necropolis of, according to Ohnefalsch-Richter, Hellenistic and Roman date, because he found some glass vessels there. Now we are interested in the built chamber tomb somewhere here, because this is the only one he saw with his own eyes. He says that here at point 19, the chamber tomb I've been dealing with already several times, and he gives the same reference for apparently an illustration of the said chamber tomb. In October 1887, he says, he came just in time to see it before the local inhabitants again had dismantled it completely in order to obtain building material. What he found was the complete ground plan, and half of it still standing upright, more or less. He continues describing that this chamber tomb consisted of a central corridor. He's not talking about the dromos. He says it has a dromos, an inclining dromos leading downwards, then starts an internal corridor, and on either side of the corridor a group of 2 chambers was opening. So what he is describing is a 4-chambered chamber tomb, which is quite a substantial novelty, I guess, for that area of ancient Cyprus. He says, he gives a quite detailed description of the construction technique, which is important, but I will not bore you with reading it. He also says, unfortunately, it wasn't possible to find a single sherd or anything else that allowed a more precise dating. He knew, however, that the necropolis behind that chamber tomb dated to what he thought may be the Hellenistic and Roman period, so his conclusion was that this chamber tomb too should date to the Hellenistic and Roman period, which I'm happy to learn what you think about after you have seen it. In all the documents preserved in Berlin, there's nothing that could correspond to that Blood 2, Blood 5 Series 2. Neither is in the British Museum in London or anywhere else one would logically look for it, and it is by pure coincidence that I found it in the next room. It is most probably this not very good photocopy of one of the typical Ohnefalsch-Richter plans. You see, it's Idalion plan 12. I just go forward a little bit, and you remember this is the one I've been pointing out at the beginning of Agios Osomenos Nikolidis. It's exactly the same type of plan of plate, where containing photographs and drawings and other things. So it definitely belongs to the Idalion publication series. And well, just going back, and it says down here in English, however, that this is a Hellenistic tomb at point 19 from plate number 2. Plate number 2, in all his publications, he was quite an economic person. He was used for Kypros, the Bible, and Homer. The first part is absolutely identical to his doctoral thesis, the cult places of ancient Cyprus. So plate number 2 is always the map of the area of Idalion, the map where point number 19 is the 4-chambered Hellenistic, supposedly Hellenistic tomb. Now, the photocopy I'm referring to is within the archives of Olivier Masson, that ended up at the Archaeological Research Unit of the University of Cyprus. The folder it is contained on isn't very precise. It says Ohnefalsch-Richter Vernon Curium, referring, of course, of the never-ending quarrel between Colonel Vernon, between Cesnola and Ohnefalsch-Richter about the Curian treasure, and it also says Dossier Copham. Neither of it has anything to do with at least these 2 plates contained in it. With a little bit of Photoshop, the plan and the drawing starts looking like this, and indeed we have the dromos leading down to the central corridor inside the built tomb, and on either side the two chambers opening to it. And since I insisted so much at the beginning that whenever we are able to verify the writings and sayings and observation of Ohnefalsch-Richter with his own eyes and words, they turn out to be correct, we do at least have no reason to believe that here it should be different. And as you may see, he very precisely indicates a gabled pointed roof. So apparently this is what he means when he says pointed roof. Before trying to sum up a little bit, we have to deal with a last built chamber tomb he is mentioning. It's at point number 09. This is the Chapel of Ioc Ergos. He says on the other side of the road still today leading down to the Chapel of Ioc Ergos takes over, at least at this point, rather exactly the city walls of Idalion. He says that the chapel sits or is built on top of the city wall, so just extramuros is that point he's referring to. This is more or less the spot where supposedly it was. And here it is quite a lengthy description. He says that in 1894, but just before I, Max Ohnefalsch-Richter, arrive on the island, the local inhabitants had found a quite extraordinarily strange stone-built tomb, which I found, Ohnefalsch-Richter, unfortunately completely demolished and most of the stones gone. So I have to restrict myself to collect and to give the declarations of the stone seekers, as he called them, to which belonged his often quoted foreman, Abrami Haralambu, or Haralambu Abrami. He used both versions, which was a quite experienced excavator. He also figures on that famous picture depicting one of the huge capitals found on the East Necropolis being loaded on a chariot, and one of the men standing there, indicated by Ohnefalsch-Richter, is the said Abrami Haralambu. So Abrami Haralambu, hence Ohnefalsch-Richter, says and writes that at the entrance of the tomb, supposedly there were two kind of relief statues, like pilasters, hewn out from stone and painted in red, colossal figures with horns. Colossal figures with horns. We will see. They were standing there like gods at either side of the entrance to the tomb. Both of these colossal figures were already demolished, but from the one, I've already seen a part of the head, more specifically the central part of the head, at the spot where the tomb was found. That was already dismantled, and also this specific part of stone was supposed to be taken away in order to be used as building material. I, Ohnefalsch-Richter, have bought it, and nowadays, so at the latest 1908, when he handed over the manuscript, it is in the Pushkin Museum in Leipzig. Just a small parenthesis. Max Ohnefalsch-Richter, when coming back from Cyprus in 1895, he started having quite a series of financial problems. Basically, all his life was dominated by financial problems. He had great hope. He invested most of the inheritance of his wife in order to buy antiquities in Cyprus, including antiquities from his own excavation, meaning that he was trying to sell quite successfully part, at least, of the third that belonged to the proprietor of the areas he was excavating, and probably also part of the third that belonged to the Cyprus Museum. So from these 2/3, when he was able to obtain things, they were not sent to the emperor. They were not sent to the antiquarium, because the emperor had the right of just 1/3, the 1/3 of the Rhimadodotis, of the sponsor of the excavation. So it is very strange, but actually it happens that 1/3 of the findings of his excavations in Idalion, they end up in the Antiquarium, which today is the Antikensammlung in Berlin. The other third, or 2/3, if he obtained them, he was free to do whatever he wanted with. He tried to sell them on the World Exhibition in 1896 in Berlin. But again, quite a huge amount of problems occurred. They didn't arrive in time, and at the end, he had to sell them for a substantial amount of money to a private collector sponsor, Valentin Weisbach. Ohnefalsch-Richter kind of persuaded the said Valentin Weisbach to donate them to the Quarry Museum in Leipzig, so he, Ohnefalsch-Richter, would be able to study them. This is how this head ended up in Leipzig. We will hear the sad news about his further fortune just in a moment. He says about that fragment of a head, which is the central part of the said colossal figure, measures 43.5 centimeters, and the largest spot it shows 36 centimeters, and it is 70 centimeters thick. One can see, he says, the beginning of the two horns. Then follows a detailed description about the quality of the work, which is supposedly rather rough. And here too, he gives the number of the illustration. He continues saying that since Abrahami sweared to the head of his mother that he tells the truth and only the truth, I have no reason not to believe him, since in all the years of our collaboration I never caught him saying a lie. This is quite a substantial reference. He continues saying that the head of that colossus resembles closely to a stone colossus that was found in Amathus and now, 1908, is preserved in Constantinopolis, and he gives the reference to the said figure in Cyprus, the Bible, and Homer, and so on, and so on, and so on. Fortunately here, within the archives in Berlin, this picture is preserved, and it says Serie 2, number 6, which is exactly the same indication than in the manuscript, and on the back side it says Tomb Entrance, Grabeingang, Koloss Gehörnter, Horned Koloss, Idalion 1894, 1 negative. And since we know that from here to here we are dealing with 43.5 centimeters, that was quite a substantial piece of work. It clearly shows a male figure with the described beginnings of two horns, and of course this is a figure of Abbas. A few words about the later fortune of that Cypriot collection in the Quarry Museum in Leipzig. First of all, it was heavily bombed during World War II, and whatever survived was sent back to Berlin under East German, during the existence of Eastern Democratic Republic of Germany. It was sent back to Berlin, and whatever survives now belongs to the collection of the Museum für Vor- und Frühgeschichte, the Museum of Prehistorical Archaeology in Berlin. However, the head doesn't belong to their actual collection, so far the only solution is that it has been destroyed during World War II. Unfortunately, that picture survives, giving quite good hints to believe that indeed it must have been quite heavily painted in order to cover the rather crude workmanship. So, to sum up, before trying to make some sense of all this, Ohnefalsch-Richter gives us one built tomb with a pointed roof at point 14. We do not learn anything about the number of chambers. 4 built tombs with pointed roofs at point 21, and they had either 1 or 2 chambers. 4 built tombs with non-pointed roofs on the small mound northeast of point 21, without indication on the numbers of chambers. 1 built tomb with pointed roof at 22, 1 built tomb with pointed roof at 19. This is the one with 4 chambers and a sloping dromos, and the base tomb with figural decorated doorways, but no whatsoever indication as to its architecture. So this is totaling 12 built chamber tombs, 7 apparently with pointed roofs and 4 not showing pointed roofs, maybe meaning that they showed flat roofs, and 1 additional one without further information on the architecture. One lesson to learn about that short gallop through Max Ohnefalsch-Richter's manuscript is that our statistics are, of course, running danger to be manipulated or being, how to say, caduc at every new discovery. Meaning that everything that has been published so far about how many built chamber tombs Site A or Site B may have shown is, of course, correct and state-of-the-art at the time of publication, as here in 2009, but with a little bit of additional discovery, the statistics at least may dramatically change. So I do not think that these statistics are forever. Simply, this is how they are the time we are speaking. Taking together the different sources available for cybergeometric, archaic, and classical period dealing with built chamber tombs in Cyprus, Idalion would totalize 13. The one already known, excavated by Abbas Georgis. If we integrate the one with the vaulted roofs, which might be from a later period, we would come to 14, adding the 12 that Ohnefalsch-Richter is describing. Salamis had 10, Amatus 10, Kition 6 or 7, meaning that Ohnefalsch-Richter refers to an otherwise not published built tomb from Kition. I haven't been able to figure out whether it is one of the 6 we know, or whether indeed we had to add a 7th one for Kition. Tamasos has 4, Xilotimbu 3, Patriki 2, Drachanas Pyla and Kurion 1. Meaning that by April 16, 2018, Idalion would be responsible for 25% of all built chamber tombs of Cyprus, which probably does not correspond to whatsoever reality. It simply is the actual statistics. Asking about the chronology of the tombs we were referring, we are facing some problems. The first one being the reliability of the indications pointed roof. What does pointed roof mean? You remember, and I may have added it here, you remember that Ohnefalsch-Richter, when he was able to observe, he very detailed differentiated the different ways to construct something that may look like a pointed roof, as well as he clearly differentiate the different ways of construction in order to obtain something like a vaulted roof. But it has to be remembered that with the exception of one tomb, that is the one with the 4 chambers, he hadn't been able to see a single one of them. He was totally relying on the indications by the local inhabitants. So I'm pretty sure that when they said it was pointed, they meant it was pointed. But were they able to differentiate between a corbelled double-pitched roof and a really gabled slab roof? I do not know. So we have to be a little bit careful about that. In any case, they were pointed either that way here or either one of these ways here. The different trials to make sense sense in terms of chronological evolution of the roofing of built chamber tombs in Cyprus proposed that slab gabling roofs may run from the Cybergeometric 3 to the Cyberarchaic 2 period, cobbled double-pitched roofs from the Cyberarchaic 1 and 2 periods, and flat roofs stretching from Cybergeometric 3 to the first half of Cyberarchaic period. So a very cautious proposal would be to place all the tombs Ohnefalsch-Richter is referring to from Idalion to something like the Cyberarchaic period, despite his own proposal to place the 4-chambered tomb into the Hellenistic period. Indeed, coming back to that quite particular piece of work, which I shall remember is the only one he was able to see with his own eyes, I wasn't able to find any close parallels. If somebody has an idea, I would be more than happy to learn about it. A little bit close to it comes that 2-chamber tomb from Igitz Tepe in Western Asia. Although there are quite substantial differences, one of it, just for the location, this is where Igitz Tepe has to be located. As you can see, the construction technique is not at all the same. Thinking that the drawings of Ohnefalsch-Richter are correct, we have a different construction technique of the roofing, and we also have the fact that, like most chamber tombs from Western Asia, the tomb from Igitz Tepe is buried by a huge mound, by a huge tumulus, which has to be handled with caution. Coming back to Cyprus, as Anne-Marie Carstens has pointed out, there might have been quite some tumuli in Cyprus. We simply have no record of it. But at least Ohnefalsch-Richter, he doesn't talk about tumuli. he says that the four tombs in a row at point 21, they were built into the mound. He doesn't say that the mound was erected on top of them, whatever that means. And coming back to the base from point 09, the comparison Ohnefalsch-Richter was giving is, of course, the huge monumental base from Amathus that still today is in the museum in Constantinople, Istanbul. And indeed, we are dealing with a massive base. According to Abrahami Harlambu and others, they had found 2 of them being on either side of the entrance to the tomb, so maybe at a comparable spot than the floral capitals from the royal tombs at Tamassos. And I have this technically high demanding Photoshop reconstruction here. Is this possible or not? Of course, and here we completely leave the path of reliable archaeology, and I apologize for that. I indeed think that there might have been a kind of a tradition, at least for some built chamber tombs, to install guards to the left and to the right of the entrance, kind of marking the passage between one world and the other. Would it be possible to imagine that the main female and the main male deity of Cyprus would be apt in order to be these gods? Quite a lot of vegetal decoration in Cypriot pottery and architectural sculpture, in my opinion, clearly shows anthropomorphic traces, anthropomorphic issues. The symbol, actually, of that newly founded, very, very small association, Studia Cyprologica Berolinensia, features an object that is preserved in Berlin nowadays. It's a jug, and the jug, here it's our symbol to the left, and this is a drawing from Kypros, the Bible, and Homer. The jug shows a vegetal decoration and 2 bulls or stags eating from it. In my opinion, it clearly is a zoomorphic representation of something like either a tree of life or a potnia pteron, including the small wings here and the small hands and arms and the quite substantial head. It was bought from Berlin Antiquarium from the Cesnola collection, just for the record. And I could imagine that quite a lot of representations like these on the 2 jugs from the Severest collection and from the Pierides collection to the right may go into the same direction, with something like a head over here and small eyes, even a necklace, and then the body with a beautiful painted dress and the 2 vegetal arms, and the same thing, a little bit more complicated, to the right. And probably the same, or one could argue at least, very, very cautiously of course, that even in architectural representation of vegetal ornaments, the same may occur. This is one of the famous pillar capitals from reportedly Atieno, and as you may know, it served as a prototype for the tomb marker of Luigi Palma di Cesnola somewhere in North America. And again, I think there's a rather clear relationship between these 2. So far for the entrance of some, well, as an example, one of the built tombs in Tamassos. And if we are looking for the combination of a supreme male deity and a supreme female deity in funeral monuments, we can stick with Colonel Cesnola. The so-called sarcophagus from Amathus does show on its smallest sides 4 representations of Astarte, and on the other side 4 representations of dancing bass. Never understood what is the plural of bass. Bases? Bases? Bass. We stick with bass. I know that Antoine Hermary and others think that these are not actual representation of bass, neither of Astarte, but rather of adorants of bass and Astarte, dressed like bass and Astarte. But at the end, it doesn't change a big deal. It simply means that we have one kind of representation of a supreme male and a supreme female deity on a highly important funeral monument. Just for the fun, John Lyndon Mayers in 1914 was of the opinion, and it's an opinion that continues up to the present day, that actually this sarcophagus was found in a 4-chamber built tomb. However, it is of the rather regular cross-shaped type and not of the opposite 2-chamber type like the specimen from Idalion. Other examples of, now coming back to the base, which we have for sure, other examples of tomb markers to the left and to the right of the entrance can be found in Lycia, like here with the heroine of Gyolbashi Trisa, which, by the way, shows a row of base sitting, standing, and dancing on the lintel of the doorway, while on the left and on the right we have 2 youth figures apparently dancing as well. So this would be the place where the Idalion base should be placed at. But of course, given the chronology of that monument, it can be used as only a distant relative to what we might have seen in Idalion at a certain moment. To a certain, in a certain way, more interesting is another built funeral monument from Gülnar Meydan Çikale in opposite Cilicia. So really, this is more or less at viewing distance from Cyprus. You can see the different architectural elements of the tomb. It has indeed a pointed gabled roof. It has a main chamber and a kind of ante-room, and the entrance to the ante-room, the real ante of that construction, were built by 2 caryatid-like sculptures, which again, in the words of Antoine Hermary, show a very distinct Cypriot influence. And also in terms of chronology, which is very cautiously proposed here, the first 3 quarters of the 6th century BC, it could come close to the monument from Idalion, for which we do not have a real chronology, one has to remind. This leads more or less directly to the overall question, which I'm absolutely unable to answer, to where does this, how to say, this construction technique of built chamber tombs come? And as you may know, in several publications, more or less direct Phoenician influence has been proposed. I'm not saying that Sophocles Hachisawas is one of the is one who pretends necessarily that everything comes from Phoenicia here. He sees with others too also Egyptian elements, but nevertheless we have quite clear indication that something from Phoenicia was going on in these built tombs from Kition, which show, at least the specimen here, something that a local inhabitant of Dali in 1894 probably would have described as a pointed roof as well. But again, it has to be reminded, we have absolutely no further indication. And this one is an interesting comparison too for the phenomenon of 2-chambered tombs as well. When talking about Phoenician forerunners, it's like with Phoenician sanctuaries, there are basically almost none. The only often quoted possible Phoenician forerunner for the type of tomb we are looking at is one single construction from Achsif in modern Israel, and it has been proposed that according to where this type of tomb does occur, it may be related to Phoenician propelled transformation of knowledge and cultural elements. I would like to stress the fact that the chamber tombs from Cyprus we are dealing with, first of all, they should be considered as being Cypriot chamber tombs. I'm not excluding that they may show some cultural contacts that were going on the island, but before talking about where they came from, we should start considering them as what they are, namely Cypriot monuments. So this was, I think, my short run through Max Ohnefalsch-Richter's contribution to build tombs, chamber tombs from Idalion. And no matter what the date of these monuments is, and no matter what their exact architectural form was, Friedrichs here, Kunst und Leben, first published in 1869. In general, the tombs of Dali are extraordinarily poor in architectural form, almost no more than holes in the ground, such as the people still use to bury they're dead, we can clearly dismiss. Thank you very much.
Dear Stephanos, I think you didn't manage to bore us. On the contrary, it was a very lively lecture, and I have a feeling that there are so many Idalion fans in the audience that you will get quite a few questions and remarks.
We'll be happy
Ready?
to. Yeah, sure.
Okay, Stephan is ready. How about you? Oh, they're being shy.
No reason.
How about Monastiraki hiding at the back?
We already had long discussions with Stephanos.
And you don't want to
The
share it
archaeology
with
of
us.
Idalion, and this is truly an archaeology of Idalion we are not aware of. This is something new. And we don't expect to see more from his team of co-workers who work on these archives, and we look forward to learning more from this precious material.
Well, you're too kind. Thank you very much.
Ma'am, are there any plans from either the department or from you to do some trial trenches in these areas where you have pinpointed, or I don't know, geophysics or something to see if there's something under there?
Well, if you remember the map, if somebody, no matter who, tries to do trial trenches at every spot Ohnefalsch-Richter indicates something, there wouldn't remain a lot of modern Dali, I guess.
But there's some courtyards that look...
Yes, there are indeed some areas that not only look quite interesting, but have never been built over by modern occupation, belong to state-owned land, so have been expropriated. And Monastiraki and myself already had to have a quite interesting talk about further possibilities also of collaborations. And from my collaborators and myself, actual policy is we first would like to publish maybe not all of the archives of Ohnefalsch-Richter, but at least a substantial part, as far as Idalion is concerned. I mean, Ohnefalsch-Richter was working all over Cyprus, and so far we are not dealing at all with whatever, Marion, for instance, or Tamassos. Other people still are doing that, so we are focusing on the area of Idalion. So first we would like to present a little bit of publication coming out from these archives, with, of course, as far as we are able to do state-of-the-art analysis of the pottery, for instance, and things like that. Once this is done, of course, one can think of further ways of verifying or extending our knowledge of what Ohnefalsch-Richter thought he had seen and found.
Stephan. This was an archaeology of the archaeology. But I found this huge vase that I have never seen before.
Nobody has. Yeah.
It looks more like a medieval troll or something. I've never seen Organso's production. I mean,
actually, when I've seen the picture, before I've read the text, and I was ready to put it away, saying that it's modern. I'm not a medievist, definitely not ancient. In that size, I mean, it's that part of the face that is preserved, and it measures 43.5 centimeters. Now, base, of course, has a tendency to have a big head, so it may be only life size. Otherwise, it would be over life size. So it's quite a huge sculpture.
Two times more than a man. 40 centimeters.
The face, okay. So it would be either considerably over life size, yeah, or just a huge base-like head. But never, it's really a substantial sculpture, no matter what it was. If you have any like Gothic architecture where we can put it at from Potamia, well, I'm open to any suggestion.
Όμως βρέθηκε ένα κεφάλι του Μπες στις πρόποδες του Ιδαλίου πριν 4 χρόνια.
Δεν το γνωρίζω.
Βρέθηκε...
Α, ναι, αυτό που βρέθηκε η Μαρία Χατσικοστή. Αυτό, ναι.
Η ομάδα της εκεί που ήταν πριν 3-4 χρόνια.
Που είναι στο μουσείο. Ναι, το έχω δει.
Δεν ξέρω αν
Νομίζω είναι στην έκθεση, έτσι.
Δεν είναι κεφάλι ακριβώς, είναι ένα μεγάλο μονολιθικό αγγείο με
Ακριβώς.
κεφάλαια.
Ναι. Σας έδειχνα δύο δείγματα για μπες στην Κύπρο, υπάρχουν και άλλα. Δηλαδή, ο γεγονός πως ο μπες στην κυπροχαϊκή εποχή υπήρχε, δεν το συζητάμε, αλλά έχει δίκιο ο Γιώργος από στιλιστική άποψη, αν τολμάει κάποιος να μιλάει για ρυθμό σε αυτό το κομμάτι, then how would you date something like that? I mean, give me a stylistic chronology. Well,
I was wondering, that wonderful picture on the cover of your forthcoming book, where is it from?
The painting?
No, I don't think it's a painting.
Well, yeah, it is.
Is it a painting or is it a photograph?
No, it's
the cover of the book.
Oh, by the way, yes,
I thought very interesting architecture.
this one here. Are we talking about this? Oh, just a second. Here. My well-known technical skills.
This is a painting.
Are we able to dim the light a little bit? It's one out of two paintings of Ohnefalsch-Richter that
By Ohnefalsch-Richter himself?
It says Max Ohnefalsch-Richter down here. That came to light very recently. The second one, which is even newer, came to light last year or a couple of years ago, and is in the Quarry, in the Severest Museum. The one in Quarry definitely shows Cyprus. It shows a small Monastiraki with apparently an excavation in front of it, and so far nobody was able to identify the church, the chapel that is depicted. Would be quite interesting because there's a very distinctive funerary stelae in front of it. I've seen some very similar examples in the Curia of Ioc Ergos, but there too nobody knows where they are from. So this is the newest one, which it's on display in Quarry, so you can go and see it. That one here was on the London art market a couple of years ago, and on the back it wrote Naples. Ohnefalsch-Richter spent the time from 1872 to 78 within others in Italy, in the surroundings of Naples. He was in the Royal Academy of within others painting, and apparently, this could be the Gulf of Naples with some specific architecture, but actually we do not know. But it is signed by Max Ohnefalsch-Richter.
So you don't think it's Cyprus? It could be
Unfortunately, I don't think so. Unfortunately, but there still may be others around. He was forced to produce quite some paintings also while being in Cyprus because he sold them, he auctioned them when he was broke in order to get some money. And this is probably how most of them we know with Cypriot themes were produced. There used to be some more in Christie's and Sotheby's sales in the 70s. Apparently all ending up in private collections, not in Cyprus. Nobody knows where they are.
That is a revelation, at least to me, this kind of this quality.
So
So you have the other one at Quarry?
Asfar. In the Severest collection. Yeah, sorry, I was mistaken. Yeah. No, sorry, I apologize. So Rita Severest is actually actively asking for anybody to identify the church on her painting.
Well, yes, please. Rinada.
First of all, I don't have any formal education on archaeology, so my question might be a bit naive. But you mentioned that inhabitants broke down some of the bindings and built their own houses. And I know it's been happening with the Venetian walls as well, to build some
Thank you. It's absolutely not a naive question. The reuse and recycling of older material, no matter from which period, it's, I'd say, normal human behavior. And it's quite a recent evolution to try to establish rules and laws clarifying if ever and if how we can reuse ancient materials. So of course nowadays you are not supposed to tear down an ancient tomb or a Venetian wall or a Gothic church nowhere in the world. It still happens. So it is quite a normal cyclus which people dealing professionally with archaeology try to avoid and try to educate people not to do so, but it still happens, despite the fact that nowadays we do have some rules all over the world.
Well, I think we have to thank you again, and we look forward to seeing the first published effort from this fantastic project.
Thank you very much.
And please come back to Cyprus soon.
Oh, you won't get rid of me very fast, don't worry. Professor Jacobo from Cyprus University, Professor Hachasavas, who used to be Director of Antiquities, is the Zanger from the German Embassy.
Stephan and Vernon during the 80s, who used to collect cabinets from the staircase, from all houses. I collected one myself, all cabinets, only cabinets. So it's not, don't expect to find anything in Idalion. I think everything was demolished. Well,
Είχαμε και εμείς διάλυση την Πέμπτη, είχαμε και εμείς διάλυση την Παρασκευή.
Wenn Sie vorher in Berlin sind, an